Well, you're live on one. I know. Just I'll take the blame for everything.
Way to go, Steve Drew.
My wife's not even here.
All right. So.
You gotta start over.
No. So the question is, am I going to kill my fish or myself? If you're not safe, you can do a lot of damage with one of those. I remember in high school, my metal shop class, we had to empty one of the big 100-pound cylinders, but it fell over in our welding shop. It was empty, had whatever residual pressure was left in it, went through a 12-inch concrete wall and bounced off the college and went in our football field. So there's a lot of pressure in these tanks. If you're not careful, they can fall over. These smaller ones, you're going to have to really work to break it because it's not going to hit. But the bigger ones, yes, very, very dangerous even empty. Not very good. And then I added this too, but we're going to try to prevent it. Like I said, you really have to work hard to do it, but it is possible. Don't do it. And the part with the fish, that comes down to being able to regulate, especially when you get into pressurized systems. Some we'll get to talk to when we break down each style here. But end of tank dump is a real thing. I don't know if you guys have heard that term or not. It's basically when you get to a certain pressure inside your tank, on a single stage regulator, 9 times out of 10, they're not made well enough to be able to control that fluctuation. They have like a working pressure point, and once it gets below there, it just dumps it, evacuates it, and I've killed fish that way. I think it was one of these two. These are both. This is like a no stage, and this is a single stage. One of them killed my tank one year. Came home, and there's fish floating to the top, and I'm like, the tank's empty. So I learned that one the hard way. So I will talk about that when we get to it. So here's where we're gonna go over all this stuff and take a look at each, and you guys make a decision what's going to work for your goals, for your tanks at home, and what you want to accomplish. So we have your yeast and sugar. I didn't add the yeast in the water part. I just made the Jello part for this. And I think I hadn't made one of these in like 10 years, so I wanted to test my recipe because I gave you guys a recipe on the next slide. I wanted to make sure I was making it right because it's been so long. But you got your basic yeast. It's nothing special. It's just your, actually for all some nice number to put. Back. So this is just your regular run-of-the-mill pack of 4 of these things for like $1 at any store. That's just your regular yeast. You can get fancy. You can buy alcohol-making yeast for making champagne and like beer and stuff like that. It's not worth it. It's a yeast system. It's not worth spending $20 for a package of yeast or whatever it costs. It works in a pinch. So back in the early 2000s, I was really active when forums were a big deal. And I had a friend that was over, I want to say he was in like India or something like that, but way out of the main cities. And at that time, they had no option to be able to exchange a CO2 tank, and the citric acid method and stuff like that wasn't really a thing at the time. So he was taking 5-gallon buckets and making yeast and sugar for his tanks. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that blows up, it's going to blow up big. He's like, I know. But I lost contact with him. He ran it for a long time, but I think he did have one blow at one point. I don't know what happened. Like I said, 20 years ago almost. But some guys get really crazy with it. So when I do a yeast, I don't do a yeast, but if I do a yeast and sugar setup, I always use a gelatin base. What that does is the way. Hold on, let me go back here. What that does is it prevents the yeast. So how it makes the CO2 is the yeast is eating the sugar in the water. That's what it's producing, and as it's making waste, it's producing CO2 as it's expanding and growing and everything else. And what that's doing is that's raising up coming out here. This is something if you are going to try this method, always use a separator / bubble counter. What this will do is if this burps and starts pushing stuff in there, it'll catch it in here, and this will tell you how many bubbles you're getting from your yeast setup, and it will hopefully prevent that burp from going into your tank, killing your fish or something like that. You don't want yeast sugar water in your tank. It doesn't smell good, and it doesn't look good, and it's not good for anything. So the pros and cons of the yeast thing, it's cheap. I mean, it's super easy once you get a recipe that you know is going to work for you. And I've spent way too many years trying this before I actually just finally said, okay, I'm actually going to try a real setup. And I honestly advise everyone to at least try it once just to see, because it's kind of fun. It's kind of like a science experiment. It's messy, so you have that for your con. And it takes time, because this, I mean, it took me, I don't know, 20 minutes total to make the Jello thing, and then however many hours I put it in the fridge today to let it set, and it still didn't set up all the way. So it can take time depending on how you go about it. Gives you a carbon source, that's definitely a pro. It's better than nothing, but not much, sadly. And then we easily source, meaning you can get sugar, yeast, and water pretty much anywhere. And then all the above, just makes it easy. Keep doing this. So this is my recipe. My recipe that I've developed over years of trying this before I actually went and pressurized. 3 cups of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon to 1/2 teaspoon of yeast, a box of whatever flavor Jello, and you want the regular sugar kind, the small ones, plenty of. That's what this is. This is one of those small ones, not the big ones. Tepid water to get your yeast activated, and I prefer to use aged or RO to start, just so I know it's pure and I'm going to get the most out of it. It's not necessary by any means. And then, like here, I marked it. This is about as far as you want to go because of those burps that I was telling you about that can happen with the yeast, especially in the gelatin, because they'll suddenly get access to the sugar from the sides, and then you start producing more, and then you get burping going on without it. Usually about a week and a half. And then the baking soda is just to offset and get your little bit more buffering capacity before it gets too alcohol, because that's what the yeast and sugar itself are doing, is making alcohol. So there's directions. It's pretty straightforward. If anybody wants to look at this later or wants something, I can email it to you, or we can figure out something. I should have printed some out. But this is how my little instructions that I decided to make. So citric acid and baking soda method. There's other types of acid and alkaline mixes that you can use. This is standard. You're going to find it, at your Amazons. Even some shops are starting to carry this kind of steel ones. I've never played with other acids or anything like that, so I have no experience. Gary and I were talking about something about that earlier. I have never experienced. I don't know if he does or not. He's done it. I stick with what the manufacturer suggests with whatever kit I'm using. You can also make these kits with those plastic, the plastic lids that you can screw on and get the C02 tube to do it. That sketches me out a little bit, so I prefer to spend a little bit more and get yourself a decent gauge. And this one's even automated with a solenoid, so it can be shut off at night. And that's one of the definite things with this, is it's really easy, especially the first week or two. When it's really producing. At nighttime, you can't shut this off. If you shut this off, it's going to build up pressure and explode. So you either pull it out of your tank, or what I used to like to do if I knew I was getting a heavy influx for like a few days when the yeast was really starting to take off, it kind of reaches an equilibrium, especially with the gelatin mix, after about a week and a half. But what I would do is I would just turn on a timer for an air pump, and I'd have air going in at nighttime, so the CO2 injecting at the same time wasn't overwhelming everything. So the pros and cons of this: it's very easy to automate. Most of the kits come with the solenoid now. Yeah.
Citric acid at the powdered form?
Yes, it's the crystalline stuff, and then I usually buy it in like a 5 or 10 pound bag in bulk. And then you need to have a scale so you can read it out and stuff like that. So that's one investment you have to make when you're doing this.
Where do you get like a 5 pound or 10 pound bag of citric acid?
I buy them on Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah, it's not cheap. It's not super expensive.
Gary say that you hate Amazon.
But you can buy, I think Whole Foods and stuff like that sells them in
It's
like the
usually in like a
pickles
canning section.
Yeah, it's
So,
like
like
the
little
canning
canning
section.
stuff, so.
I was gonna say I have those plastic ones on my brine shrimp hatchery, and I've broken multiple.
Yeah.
I would never put those on CO2.
I know, that's scary. This stuff scares me. Like that 2 liter setup is sketchy, because you have to, when you're setting this up, that's what that slight learning curve. On these, there's a slight learning curve. You have to squeeze. Basically, you screw these all together, and you have, this much of an acid mix, and then like just a tiny bit of this one's spent, just a tiny bit of the really alkaline. And what you're doing is you're building up pressure to equalize between the two. And as this releases through the top into your tank, it's causing a siphon and pulling more acid in there, and it builds up pressure. It's rather violent, honestly, if you're paying attention to it.
Do I need to be sitting back?
No, it's not active anymore. That's been that way for 6 months. But if I was just freshly, I try to avoid it after about 5 minutes to get it to go and make sure it's okay.
Yeah.
Luckily, you have built-in pressure relief valves, but they don't always work, especially with the cheap stuff. So,
More bad news.
sorry, Drew. Sacrifices you got to make to be camera. But I think you're safe. That one, the stainless steel is completely empty. I cleaned that up today.
Drop them, or it has to replace the box.
What's that?
The drop-in time to replace the box.
Yeah, I
They'll hold about
honestly don't
100
know if I would put more than a few months on the bottle before I replace
They'll
it.
hold about 140 to 50 psi pretty easily.
Yeah, they hold. They're supposed to.
So they have to-
Standard is 150 psi from according to the internet anyway. For the different manufacturers, bottles are supposed to be 150 minimum psi on them. I don't know what this gets to because it's measured in bars, and I don't remember the conversion for that. I think it's like 17 or 14 pounds per bar, something like that. So the relatively consistent part. This system, yeah, it's consistent for a good week to 2 weeks. After that, you'll have good pressure, but you won't have super consistent, especially when you start getting low on the mixed part. So this style with the citric acid, you dump everything at once and cap it and hope it doesn't explode. But it's not that it's violent as you think. It sounds violent.
Yeah, it
the
does.
instructions make it sound violent. It's really not that big of a deal, but I still try to work fast. I know you always don't want to tip it at an angle so it's blowing out that way and not in your race. But that's all covered in the manufacturer's instructions, I promise. if you can get through the translation.
Yeah.
What size tank does that support?
What's that?
What size tank does that support?
This I ran on my wife's 20-gallon for a while. I've upgraded. This is a 2 or 2.5 liter version. They make a 4-liter gallon or versions as well, which is about the size of a 10. A little bit smaller than a 10-pound cylinder. And that I got almost 2 months out of on a 20-gallon tank. That's pretty impressive. So
What do you mean for a large tank?
pressurized system, a real tank, a real system.
You want me to set this up on the
I mean,
table?
I'll do that. But this I wouldn't recommend for anything over 20 to 29 gallons. If you wanted to make it worth the time anyway, it'll work. It'll look great. You can do a consistent 2 bubbles per second for with this one probably 2 to 2.5 weeks. The 4-liter you could probably get at least a solid that high. I do about 1 to 1.5 bubbles per second on her tank, and it's more of a hard water tank that I have plants in there. So get a little bit of carbon in there. And I got her, I think I got 6 to 7 weeks out of it consistently, and then it started dropping off slowly. I still haven't changed it on YouTube. But, to me, that's your best bang for your buck on a smaller tank. It just really is. I mean, if you're dedicated like I am and you're really into plants and you farm plants and stuff like that, always a pressurized system is going to be the best way. But for the average person that just wants to test out CO2, you don't want to commit hundreds of dollars or whatever. For $100 or less, you can get a decent system going with that. And at the end, I will give you guys a contact of mine that I don't know exactly what he does. I think he's either an RNA agent in between F zone and then, or he just buys their returns in open boxes and then resells them. Either way, he's been great to me. He's always given me really good deals. I found him on eBay, and then I realized he was the same guy I was seeing posting on Reddit where I sell a lot of plants. And he put it together and he messaged me. And anyway, now if I see something on eBay under his name, I just buy it. I just contact him on there. I told him, you know what, you've never given me a deal, but You've always treated me fair and given me what I feel is a fair deal compared to everyone else. So I will promote him, and I have his contact information if anybody. I think literally he's running everything 50% compared to Amazon. I think this isn't the same brand. He sells better quality. He sells the Mag Tool / F Zone. They're the same company. A little bit nicer than this one. I have the 4-liter. I think I paid whatever $65, and it's 160 on Amazon. And it had never been assembled when I got it. So stuff like that. He's got a few little things, some other stuff you'll see at the end here. But I recommend him. His name's Kevin Wong. You can get a hold of him on Facebook, and he gave me his direct email if you guys are interested. He's a good guy. He's always treated me right. He's out of Brooklyn, so he gets stuff out here pretty quick. That's my contact for the citric acid. And that's the one regulators. He also does Chihiros and stuff like that, but that doesn't apply to this. So, I don't have one because I hate them so much, but you guys have all seen the fluids and all these little tiny disposable canisters that last about 3 days. They're about $20 a canister. Yeah. So this is what I feel about that. This is what you get with that. Just dump it.
Something you did.
Oh, I think I said that. So I ran out of pros, so I couldn't even get 5 pros for that type of setup. So it's a pressurized system. That's a pro, right? It's easily automated, and most of them don't come with any sort of solenoid. But these cheap solenoids from China, they're honestly more reliable than some of these regular ones, honestly. But they're like $17-20 on Amazon or eBay or anywhere. AliExpress are probably like $6 and take 12 years to get here. But you can get them cheap. They work. They're cheap enough, and if they don't work, that you can just replace them after a few months or a year. And they work directly on these little. So this was originally my very first pressurized. I was so proud of it. I spent like $80 for a stupid canister that lasted me 2 days. So they make these adapters that screw into the regulator that convert it over to paintball. Paintball is a little bit more manageable and affordable to refill CO2 wise. Not so much today because it's really hard to find people that refill them, but back in 10, 15 years ago, there was a paintball field everywhere, or even Dick's used to do it in the store. They don't anymore. So I found that out the hard way. I actually bought like three tanks when I first set up. You have a question? What's up?
Question from the chat. What is the best tank size for a 40-gallon group?
You're going to want to go with the pressurized system, the full pressurized system.
All right, full pressurized.
Anything 29 and above, I'm going to recommend a pressurized system for everything, honestly. But
Okay.
if you want to stick with the budget and you're under 29 gallons or 29 gallons, and you're not really sold, you want to do it long term, try one of these stainless steel citric acid systems. I like them. I'm impressed by them. I didn't think I would be. By no means is it the quality of a pressurized system, but on the DIY side of things, you're not going to get anything better.
Very good.
So I thought for some reason, I think I got Art of Aquaria in your tank in your living room mixed up. That's why I asked you if you had a tank. That little one of them, they'll get Art of Aquaria, they have that little fuel system or something. I thought that was yours.
Those swivel, that's the disposable.
Yeah, the disposable.
like Petco
I
and
don't
places
have
sell.
one, and I'm not going to buy one just to show you guys. But
I have one.
Everybody been over your house except for me?
yeah.
I invited you.
But really, there's no reason to buy them anymore, unless you're going to put an adapter on it. It's just not worth it.
Did you find a place to refill the paintball?
Art of Aquaria is doing it. I have my own, but I do not have a cylinder with a dip tube. So if you don't have a cylinder with a dip tube to refill these, you have to flip the whole canister upside down so it shoots the liquid out of the port. In a little apartment, I'm not sticking a 40-pound CO2 thing up in the air.
I get my paintballs refilled at Gateway Paintball.
Yes.
Got to call them and make sure that they're there. It's up pretty far north, basically the end of 141 north.
Wasn't it
The
basically
Gateway
where all the
Paintball, they fill them up for $5. I will say, time-wise, I haven't found it to be worthwhile to have paintball at all. I would definitely personally go with, and I've played with some of these methods before, a 5 or 10 gallon tank, and I went with a 20 pound to run 5 tanks off. Yeah, it just don't have to fill it up. It's the time.
Even those were C10.
Yeah, it seems maybe the 25.
I don't know how many of these I've changed on the columns, but a lot of them had time, especially the DIY is the column. Just because I think actually one of the pressurized even has it, which we're going to get to here. So the disposables, I don't recommend. Do it, they'll work, but it's really a waste of money. Even finding generic ones is not. I don't know if those generic ones that you find on Amazon, the red matches or not, and I'm not one of their testers. So I don't really want to pierce a pierceable tank and be stuck with it not working. Doesn't sound like fun. So I haven't tried it. There might be a generic way around it. Have at it. I'm good. I don't think it's worth your time to be swapping out tanks every week if you can get a week out of it. Yeah. The best part is being able to convert into a paintball if you're going to stick with something that's small. Really, that's what it comes down to. So, I just want to put that little asterisk there. 9 out of 10 tanks you're going to find online for sale are now HPA, which is high pressure air tanks that don't use as much CO2 on paintball markers anywhere in the guns. They're using high pressure, which literally they're using pumps and especially in air compressors and stuff and doing it that way nowadays. So if you are going to do the paintball, make sure it's strictly for CO2 and not an HPA tank. Because you will not have a good day if you try to take that.
Doesn't work.
Yeah. So, great option for nano tanks. It's kind of one of those things that was amazing when they first came out like 15 years ago, somewhere around there, 15, 20 years ago. Now we've kind of outgrown it, and the industry kind of allowed it to be outgrown decent and affordable regular setups, which are easier to get filled and find. So, startup costs vary. You can get fancier ones. I think I bought that in 2006, that black one there. I think I bought that in 2006 and it's the same price today. It's
This one?
$100. Yes, that one right there, the Aquatech of California, I believe it was.
This one
It
here.
was really the first commercially available one, and still was one of the. There's a couple, like I think Epstone has one, GLA has adapters for their. You can actually get them in dual stage. Either one of those are dual stage. What dual stage does, because I haven't explained that. Sorry. So a dual stage regulator. These basic ones are single stage, where it's just made to make it reduce your pressure. Doesn't have any extra safeties involved. These regulators, both over here, the standard ones that I'll show you guys in a minute, are both dual stage. What that does is prevents that end of tank dump, like I was telling you guys at the beginning, where when that pressure hits a certain level threshold, the regulator just lets it go. This stops it, and I can literally drain my tank full with nothing in there. I don't worry about anything except for running out of CO2 and algae. That's the one I don't have to worry about my fish just being distressed or whatever. So I recommend it's worth the extra $20 or whatever, depending on who you buy from, to buy a dual stage, just if you care about your fish. Because 9 out of 10, it's going to be at that point before I realize it's at that point where it would have ended. Tank dumped on me. I don't realize until it's way down from where it should be on my working pressure for my ball pressure. And by that time, literally your fish are probably gasping 9 times out of 10 on the single stage. So you can find the paintballs in dual stage, and if you decide that's the size you're going to do a lot, get a dual stage regulator. They're easier to find, but they never used to be a thing up until recently. And that's honestly, I think it's because of the adapter popularity. People just started making adapters for the heavier precision stuff. Adapters, basically. I've seen people run that same black one on regular tanks with an adapter. I wouldn't do it, but people do it. I don't know why. I guess people like to live a little bit dangerously in a different method. I don't know. There's your standard fill. This is what I run. I run multi. What you can't see is there's another six-piece manifold below that one. So I'm running 12 off of one regulator off of one bottle for my setups. I farm plants. I grow massive amounts of plants. You guys get to see what I give away. You don't see what I throw away or sell, and I sell a lot. I literally can at some point sell by the pound, but that's because of this. This allows me to get away with it and push my limits and stuff like that. So let's start talking about this. This is your standard stuff here. This is.
You want me to toggle over to the video?
Oh, sure. So here is your standard. This is your F Zone. I think it's called a 2020 Pro is the model number.
Switch up.
Oh.
I'll switch it over.
Technical difficulties.
If not,
Please hold.
I still got it here.
So you,
There we go. There we go. This here is your solenoid. The solenoid, for those of you that aren't sure what that does, this you put on a timer. I don't know why I just now get into this, sorry. The solenoid is going to allow you to shut this off at night or whenever your lights are off. And you don't have to shut it off manually. You don't have to worry about the gas going into your tanks and wasting, because your plants aren't using it at nighttime. They're actually producing their own. This is a dual stage regulator. It doesn't look like much. Your typical, like more industrial style, usually have a bigger piece back end like this one, and that's usually how you can tell by looking at them. This one is supposed to be a dual stage. It has great reviews. I haven't used this one. I bought it like, I don't even remember, 6 months ago for a backup.
Is that the
Is
F-Zone?
this how this comes? It looks like a.
This? No, this is.
No, this here.
Oh.
It looks like how you turn on your faucet
Yeah.
on the sink.
No, this is what I have. That was on my video thing. I have another one of these with 2 different things on
Is
there.
that first one the F-Zone?
This one? Yes, this is the F Zone.
I've been using that for 2 years, and I'm running 5 tanks off of it with the same manifold that you recommended.
This brass one.
Yep, and I think it's, I haven't checked Amazon, but about $130. It's not that expensive for the dual stage F-Zone.
My boy Kevin, $80 for that.
Got ripped off.
my boy.
I'm telling you.
Steven's just spent unused money. That's what he does. He has a lot of it.
But I actually bought this off of eBay. I didn't buy it from Kevin. Sorry, Kevin. But I bought it for $50, and it was one of those make an offer things, and I was like, this guy's gonna sell it. Got it. Well, it's not even been put on a tank before. So eBay is a good option. If, read feedback, check the pictures closely.
Pretty good, Kim.
What brand's the other one?
This other one's just some generic. It says like, I don't even remember, Dicey or something. I've seen this with different. This little plug comes off. I've seen it with 5 different other brands that are all the same.
Yeah.
It's just a generic Chinese thing, but they're fairly consistent. But,
Yeah.
and I think I'm pretty sure this manifold was more than the regulator. And those manifolds are not cheap, not the good ones anyway.
I tried 2 different manifolds that looked just like that before I bought the one that Justin recommended, because the one he recommended cost twice as much.
Yeah.
But the first 2 are not garbage.
That's the $200 one.
Is there like a maximum distance to tanks? Like say you have like a room with tanks all the way around the room. Like you said, like the middle would it be too long? Like certain line you can use, or
This CO2 line, as great as it is still leaks over distance. So you're still going to get some leakage through the walls. The quality, you can get some really high quality CO2 line that's expensive. You might be able to get away with it that way, especially stuff that's thicker than the they have that.
when you buy CO2 line, does it tell you like distances on it usually, or is it just kind of?
You might be able to get that from the manufacturer. I've never had to ask. That's why I have so many systems, because I usually keep everything within a small area. That's why I run maximum of 10 feet of line if I have to. And then I have a different system if I need to get a little bit further. That's just mine. I don't want to spend $100 just on CO2 line. This stuff's expensive enough. I mean, it's like $20 for 16 feet or something like that. It's not cheap as it is. And this stuff only lasts, depends on the tank, but it'll get, the problem with these, and what I should have mentioned with the CO2 too, is you need to check these ever so often in your tanks, especially at joints like this. On your check valves, you should get stainless steel check valves with pressure rods. You just cheap and I grab them real quick out of my fish area. Stainless steel ones, I'm thinking they're starting to make like really cheap ones, because I bought some off of Amazon and they were rusty in a month. So they're expensive for the better ones, and I think I'm just going to have to source the better ones. But you will see on the connection areas, especially on your diffuser, like where you mounted the diffuser, it'll start to get really hard, and it'll start cracking is what it will do eventually, and it'll split. I had one that split somewhere in like the 10 feet of it. Had no clue for like a month, and I couldn't figure out why it just kept getting algae. And my CO2, I run my tanks so soft to water. Half the time, the CO2 is not even doing anything because my tanks are already at 6.2 or something like that. I run straight RODI water in my tanks, and then I remineralize with my. That's what I find works best for most of my plants, and that's what I focus on with my plants.
When you say the CO2 is not doing anything, you mean it's not changing the pH more?
Right. It's not adding a whole lot, because I don't need a whole lot to get to that equilibrium.
But it's still growing some crazy plants.
No, I don't know how to grow plants.
Going back to the PowerPoint?
Yeah, let's get back to it. So here's your pros and cons of these guys. You got more reliability. It's the most reliable system you can get. Again, it comes down to paying for quality versus, you can get a budget thing like that. I got lucky. I haven't even tried this one, my backup of that brand. The one I've been using for close to a year and a half. I think I got it for my birthday, a year and a half ago. Yeah, I got my first one. I've been running that with upwards. I think the most I've had running off that was 10 outlets, and works fine. I haven't had any issues. I've watched it try to do end of tank dump, and it won't, which I'm thankful for. And I paid like $80 or $90 for it. And like I said, the manifolds are more than the regulator. But you can also not even get started with a single outlet for under $600 if you want to get super fancy. You can get precision lab grade needle valves, and literally you can do fractions of almost. That's how precise they are, and overkill them. I don't think anybody truly needs that much precision for planting a tank. So definitely going to recommend dual stage if you're going to go this route. You might as well spend that extra couple bucks to just have that safety net for yourself and the fish. But at the same time, because of that safety net, you need to make sure you're checking your pressure, your tank pressure gauge on your regulator. Otherwise, you're not going to know you ran out of CO2 because nothing's going to die. I tell you, and that's how you usually know with a regular regulator. You just kill something. So that was a joke, by the way. It doesn't really go, but it can. So that's what I'm talking about with the whole can it harm your fish yourself. Yes, it has a possibility if you're not observing and paying attention to your equipment. You need to be adamant about handling safely, and making sure that you're not gassing your home. Make sure you have, you're checking for leaks. So if you don't have a CO2 monitor in your house, it might be a good idea. I don't have one, but hey, whatever.
I think it's only that's carbon monoxide.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's
carbon dioxide's all right.
Carbon, whatever. Okay, so it can get expensive. The bottles, especially locally, I think CK is about your best supplier for the area. I use another one that's close to my house just because the CK is the closest one I'm using. I'm following on at St. Peter's.
Northern Tulip that does handle CO2
Do they do?
and setting and stuff in.
Okay, I've been to Northern Tool. I bought my blasting sand run. I didn't know they did CO2 though. Interesting. I've been using, I think it's called Luminaire now. It used to be Praxair. They just got bought out at the end of the year. This month, my 10-pound bottle went up $10. So they said there was a CO2 shortage. So yes, we have CO2. I don't know how that works, but there's apparently a CO2 shortage going on all over the country. While they're talking about CO2 in our atmosphere. But anyway, it literally went up $10 for a 10-pound bottle between my last exchange a couple months ago and this went from $34 to
That's full.
Yeah, it's completely.
Jeez.
Hey, it's full.
Sorry. That's a 10-pound bottle, meaning it has 10 pounds of liquid CO2 added to it. It really weighs.
It weighs more than 10 pounds, yeah.
About 40 or 50 pounds because of how thick it is.
10 pounds of CO2 plus whatever.
Yeah. And empty. It's
Weighs about 500 pounds.
Yes. And I live upstairs, so I'm trying to carry two. So that's great. So, let's say here. Upgrades. So you can do upgrades. You can do all kinds of upgrades, obviously. You can get $500 needle valves if you want one little valve. It's possible. They're ridiculous. Lab grade stuff is very precise and very expensive, like I said. I don't know anybody that needs that much precision on a planet tank. And if you do, you're doing something crazy that I want to know. I want to be a part of anyway, because there's no reason for that. They're nice. They look fancy. They're shiny and all that stuff. Not even all the time, but usually you can get on eBay and find a single outlet that's running $600 because somebody hand built it, and you know it's a nice piece of equipment, but it's not a $600 piece of equipment to a hobbyist. To a lab or somebody like that, maybe. But I don't operate like that. I don't need to. My plants don't care that much. And yours won't either, I promise. So, upgrades, as far as stuff like that. These are your outlet blocks. Instead of going with something like this, so this thing's heavy. This is the block that came off of here. So this would normally go in series with this, and it would give you two outlets. On my one at home, I have this one here and then another one, a mini or cheaper one like Steve was mentioning, that has a shorter neck, and I somehow squeezed it to fit like right in here, is like over here. I don't remember how I did. I think I screwed this on and then screwed, I don't know. It took me like a couple hours to get it figured out, but I finally got it figured out. I'm going to put that block in between and space it out to make it work better. But stuff like these, you can buy these all day long and get, I don't know how far they recommend, but I've seen them built out to like 8 of these blocks. I don't know how accurate they work for that. This is your needle valve. This is normally where your regular old bubble counter would become, or your line, depending on how you want to do it. I crank this open. All my fine tuning and adjustment goes to each tank through these needle valves here. These are much better. This is also the same company, the Aquatech of California. They are the only ones I know of that make a robust manifold like this. They are not cheap. They are almost impossible to find in stock unless you buy them up from them directly on eBay. And then they went from, how much were they when you bought it?
I paid 60.
Yeah, they're not 60 no more. So that was what, 6 months ago?
Something like that.
A year ago? Less than a year ago? They were 60, 70-ish. Now they're almost 90. So I think I paid close to 90 for the second one I have.
They have smaller ones too, or no?
They make a 3 and a 2, I believe, and they're almost the same price. It's not even worth it. So you can get crazy, but the fact that it's brass and it's a very solid manifold, don't get me wrong. It does not come, and that does not come with these bubble counters. These are separate that I purchased. Another thing, if you do buy these and you do want to run it like this, these little miniature O-rings on any of these systems from China and stuff like that, they always come with these blue O-rings. It's like a tealish blue, jump, throw them away, go to hardware store, grab you some nice black ones, put them on there and make sure you get the seals. Those blue ones that come with those kits are just, they almost feel like felt. They feel like a eraser on a pencil. They're very soft and they leak.
So when you're replacing the O-rings, how long do you usually keep the O-ring on, or do you like these smaller systems, can you like reform that up and replace the O-rings?
I haven't had to. I just tend to check every couple of these. These I'm actually checking every time because that's what I do. I'll pull them. So mine's going to be right here. This is where how I disconnected and pulled away from my system to go fix it. So I'll leave that, and that's my only O-ring that I'm really, except for this on the neck, it has one, but that one's, you know, it's 3 millimeters. It's pretty good.
I have a tank just like that one.
Yeah. So just keep an eye on it, look, feel, make sure it's not getting solid, because these tend to be better. These tend to have like nylon-ish stuff on the inside of the seal, which isn't really going to wear down, but it might harden and crack over time. I don't know. I haven't ran them long enough to know personally. So, yes, that was a good point. Check your O-rings. Always, if you're doing any, whatever, that doesn't count. But if you're doing anything like this, always have a spray bottle with 1 or 2 drops of dish soap. Spray around all your joints. This thing right here, this is called a stop leaker. It screws into the neck. Don't forget this when you exchange your tank if you have a tank. The gas company will not give you a refund if you stick a $5 seal and give it to them. It screws in. It eliminates leaks. It really does work. Now these systems, oh, I lost it. Oh, wait. Huh?
When you get up from CK,
Yeah.
they have the most of their shots.
Oh, they give them to you? Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
They have them in there already.
Awesome. Well, apparently CK is even better to work. I need to start doing that. But this regular doesn't have, it comes with the same seal, but it doesn't adjust. This one actually locks in place. I leave it.
That was my next point. Can you have 2?
Yes, I use both
Okay.
on this style. This one does not, I have another one of those, but it doesn't lock in place. So with this system, I would run just this. But this one, since it's installed on the neck itself, I run both. And I haven't had any leaking from here at all. My biggest problem with leaking was the cheap manifolds from Amazon that you see. Those things leak like a sieve on their risers.
Steve is in agreement.
Yeah.
I spend so much
Yeah,
time on
yeah.
my $20 or
They're
$30
horrible.
manifolds. They're garbage.
What does work though, that little knurl piece, throw that away, that's junk. If you get down to this part where it's just the little bolt thing like on these, if you can get it down to there and get a good O-ring on it, it will work and it won't leak on those cheap ones. But you only have a rise about 1 inch or so. So they're doable. That's what I did with that other one on my home system. These are your, here, I'll just show you how you do it. So on here, you're going to get on here. These usually come with your regulator. Always install it before you try to put it on there because you're going to leave it there.
About to do this right in.
It's okay, man. It's not even open. It's not even open. Get it? Come on, Drew. First he forgets what car he's driving at the auction.
I have one of my sons open it for me because it freaks me out every single
Oh,
time.
the actual tank.
Yes. But I'm like,
I used to be a welder, so I'm.
like, don't lift this over. It's gonna blow
I used to
up
be
your
a welder
apartment.
by trade, so
Can you vent the tank? Like I have to vent
these
it
are
over
baby
there.
tanks to me. I'm used to
Freaks me
100
out.
pounders.
You guys are.
Pointing it right at you, Drew.
I see.
Somebody-
You're not helping.
Come here.
We'd go through 100 of those a week. At the park.
Yeah.
So we'd always set them off to the side. Every once in a while, you had to be careful because before you pick them up, you had to go through and spin all the caps to make sure they were open. 'Cause they don't want them. They don't
Yeah,
want
they
them
don't
closed.
want-
They want them open to know that there's no pressure. And every once in a while, you get a bad tank, and somebody will make the mistake of putting it in the empty pile. And I've seen it done where somebody goes through and is flipping valves,
That's
and you get one of those tanks, and you flip it, and now all of a sudden you've got a 60-pound
Projectile.
tornado flying around.
None of this helps. None of this helps me right here.
What's wrong, So these are designed to be on your
I'm
tank
really
at all
eager to do
times.
this now.
Even I could do it now, Drew. It's just in the beginning.
I just leave my wrench on here like this all the time.
I don't have a wrench.
I'll just stick to the Anubias.
Even I can do it like in
And
your
I
stream
have
yard.
Like
You
that.
strap them down, or do you leave them just sitting?
Mine, I have the big fat zip ties, and I zip tie the bobble to my, I zip tie my regulator. That's what I do. I have a zip tie that goes to my regulator that holds it to the arm of the leg of my rack, my metal rack. That way, that stays put. I'm gonna disconnect it. My regulator's in the same spot because I have hoses everywhere because I have 12 outlets. And it just stays in slide my bottle in, cap it off, I'm good. I'm back up and running like that. Don't worry, Drew, I'm not gonna crack it, I promise.
Okay, all right. Hey, it's your stuff.
So, but that's the gist. It's fairly simple. You never want to crack it unless you're confident in your seal, because this will freeze and shoot out at you. And it's not. This is how you make dry ice.
It's more bad news.
Yeah. Let's just put it that way. That's how you make dry ice. Is just by shooting that.
It either blows up, freezes your face, or torpedoes out of your house. Yes.
It comes in handy if you got a wet rag in your eye.
Kids,
Yeah.
don't do this at home.
Yeah, don't do this at home with the trained professionals.
Well, it can't explode unless it mixes with another gas.
CO2 is wet.
So,
There you go.
It's just cold.
You want back to that one?
yeah, I think we're actually done with the
My
slides
son
for the
told
most
me
part.
he's a welder. He's
Wet
like,
rag,
I wanna put
open it up into a wet rag,
Where am I at?
do that. And
Good time, I don't have a clock, so.
Yeah.
He took my phone,
Sorry.
my computer doesn't show him presentation.
Got a question on the floor.
Yeah.
Got a question.
Yep.
This is all great, but,
No.
and I know what you're talking about, but can you explain why you would want to put CO2 to your tank?
Well, that's another talk, Rob.
Huh?
That's another talk. But, yeah.
I just have basically, I think,
Yeah, I can give you the basics. So, what you're gonna do, so, I'm trying to think of the easiest way to break this down. The difference between an aquarium aquatic plant and, say, a terrestrial plant that's out here. These plants have all the access they want to all the free CO2 they want from the air. Your plants are submerged in water, and whatever's saturated in your water column is all they have access to until you supplement. And I mean, there's science and stuff like that. Like your pH affect you. That's all. Like I said, another complex talk is separate. But the gist of it is, what you're doing is you're offering your plants that extra bit of fuel.
Nutrition, yeah.
CO2 is fertilizer.
Yeah, fertilizer, it's fuel.
No,
So you're balancing
It's not CO2 is fertilizer.
fertilizer, CO2 is fertilizer, lights of fertilizer. It's all a big triangle and sort of, it's all a balancing act inside of a plant aquarium.
so that your plants can effectively use photosynthesis.
Right, and that's what you're doing. And when you see these pearls, because you have so much saturation in your tank, your water will start hitting the equilibrium where oxygen starts producing and saturating, and there's so much CO2 and or oxygen in the water that one has to give. And that's why you see the pearl from the oxygen for the photosynthesis of your plants, stuff like that, because you have such a high saturation and your concentration of your water that one of the others is going to show, it's also going to show. But that's why you get that, because you're at it with people that are in a scenario like it's be the best way to do that. This is my guy, Kevin Wong. You can find him on Facebook. That's his direct email. This is his pricing. Oh, apparently that got moved over. So the 2.5 liter version of this from a different brand, it was 55, and I believe the 4 liter is 65. It's underneath that slide, or underneath the picture that somehow shifted in between here and last night. This is $80 for him, and these are. Then he's got drop checkers like this style here for $5 a piece. They're supposed to be brand new, and he's got this new style of diffuser. So the diffuser, I forgot to talk about that. Sorry. So diffusing, what are you wanting to do? You have your CO2 coming through here. It's forced. This is like, think of it as a RO membrane for CO2 basically. It's only permitting certain size stuff to come through. And it's making it a micro bubble, so therefore that bubble, being so small, is able to get dissolved into the water column before it hits the top and comes out and wastes. So the further you can get your source to come out away from the top of the tank, the better.
Do you prefer?
I prefer these in lines. This is my new favorite style. I have one of these. I have like 3 or 4 of these. These go on your canister filters. Your line comes in through here, and your water is flowing through here. This little gap here is your water flowing around. Inside here is a ceramic kit, or ceramic, whatever, toothpaste. And the water is picking that. So I guess I have to know what you're holding on to. So this is going to push the CO2 on the outside of this. Your water is flowing through here, and once the pressure builds up into this little area, it's going to force the CO2 in, and the water is going to pick it up from your canister and pull it in. I'm waiting.
Earlier, somebody mentioned running airlines too far. What if you were to run your pump lines farther and use that system? Because I would bet you would lose less because of the exposure time.
You mean like off of the canister itself?
Like off the canister itself.
You have to have a really strong canister to get that kind of length though too. You know what I mean? Because the longer your tube and the further away from your tank, the more you lose as far as return. That's one thing I find difficult with CO2 is trying to find that happy medium of where to put this in line. They always say to put it in your return line. 9 times out of 10, I put it in my in line. That way it saturates longer. My filtration on most of my tanks is not for anything other than water movement and to push my CO2 around the tank. The fish stuff is usually handled otherwise by the plants and other types of filter. I usually always have an internal filter. I like water movement. My tanks like water movement. I'm a big proponent of water flow for planted aquariums, and it makes a huge difference in between success and algae. It really helps distribute stuff throughout.
Yeah. When you said that when you came back and the fish had died, what had happened? What messed up?
So what had happened when I killed all my fish?
Sorry, bring that
No,
back
you're
up.
fine. No.
All right. It's painful.
What happened? It was like 10 years ago. It was my pea puffers, which
Still
is my
hurts.
favorite fish that I've had. It was my old pea puffers pair. What happened is, I think it wasn't this tank, but it was on a CO2, paintball CO2 tank. I was busy, wasn't paying attention to how much pressure was left in my tank. Was gone for the day, came home, and as I got there, literally the last of the tank was dumping at that moment. My puffer was puffed up. I had a pair in there. One was dead, but one was puffed up at the top floating, like gasping, and I was like, and then I looked at my pressure and I realized what had happened.
So
Frosted on the outside.
Okay, so it's the something froze. What would be the?
It basically pulls all the oxygen out.
Okay, so
it
all
just
the
oversaturates.
Okay.
And you just can't breathe. And if you don't have enough gas, that's another reason I'm so big on flow. It's gas exchange at the top.
Okay.
I don't want the top of my tank like rippling, but
Yeah.
I want it moving and flowing, almost like a slack tide type of thing.
So that's what happens when the CO2 tank goes out. That's why you say you got to pay attention to your levels at all times.
Did a dual stage regulator, right?
Or a dual stage keeps you
It's common
The
now.
regulator probably has minimum pressure, working
Yes.
pressure. When it hits a certain level,
And the
it's no
seal-
longer, the seal's no longer held, so it just falls.
Right. Yep.
And then
That's
it
exactly what
expands
happens.
everything out.
Yeah.
Doosh, and it shoots out past it. The seal's worthless at that point.
Jeez.
So, other than that, I think we covered
I
it.
have another question.
No,
No.
I've already told you all these things. What?
Melanie Holmes going overtime.
Sorry. So I know you said you use a drop checker kind of with
Yes.
the color, which I do too, but
I don't
the
believe
debate
them
about
anymore.
using the pH.
pH probe is one way to go for sure. Whether or not you're running your solenoid based off of that is a whole other, controversial method of doing it. I've never
You
done
don't do
anything.
that either. You just-
I've heard too many nightmares about worrying about just pH. Because what you're doing with a pH monitoring system, you're plugging your solenoid into your pH monitor, and you have a probe in your tank, and it's shutting off all throughout the day. Once it hits that pH that you set it to, once enough CO2, shuts it off, and then it comes back on after it goes back up because it's gassed off. That's not consistent plants. But people swear by it. I don't believe it. So you can do it if you want. It was too advanced and waste of money for me. If I did do it, it would be like a really tight window of maybe point something. I wouldn't be doing a whole swing. And some people with the drop checker thing I mentioned earlier, with the 30 parts per million, and based off of that, what you're looking for, they say you're looking for is a full pH point drop once you're injecting. So let's say your tank runs 7.2. You want to hit 6.2 with your CO2 if that's what you're going for. In theory, whatever works for you works for you. But that's what the standard is you're looking for a full pH drop with your CO2 on. I don't go by that. I watch my plants and they tell me what they need. I also don't depend on drop checkers because it's only, so the way this works is, I started explaining, that liquid's in there, it's getting the gas off. So pretend like this is the top of your water on your tank. It would be off gassing, right, when you have agitation on the surface. The CO2 and oxygen would be coming out of your water at the surface. What it's doing is it's getting trapped in this tube and coming, the acid from the CO2 is reading into the pH indicator fluid at a set pH, so you know your baseline. So when it goes from this color of blue to a green or to a yellow, you know basically this is 7.0 in theory. When it gets to 6.5 or 7 or 6, you're going to have a color change and it's supposed to give you a reading. It gives you the reading for that precise point in your tank. It doesn't give you a reading for the full tank. And everyone uses these wrong because they put it at the surface. It doesn't matter what's at the surface because that's where it's escaping. What matters is what's at the substrate. And people never use those at the substrate.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So the dude Fenton and the dude at Troy have pH of what, 10, 12? That's your buffering capacity.
Yeah.
And then you have some other guy in Ferguson somewhere that has RO water in their tank, and they're both trying to do 1 pH. Essentially, CO2 is acid. So how can these guys go 1 pH and be saying, one, it's going to be oversaturated and fish are going to be bubbling right surface. So that's always the problem I have with people saying, do 1 pH.
Right.
If your pH, your buffering capacity is way off, you'll never get there in your official dead.
I completely agree with you. I think the standards are not accurate, but that's what everyone tells you. What you need to do is get good enough to know what your plants want. Seriously, that's literally the most success you can have is knowing how to grow your plants and what they want. I don't care what my drop check is telling me. I care what my plant's telling me. I want to see pearling by a certain time of the day, or I want to watch my fish, not getting too, it just depends. Like, there's a lot to this, but it doesn't have to be. That just comes from decades of tinkering. The basic people, there's plenty of information. My way isn't going to work for him. My way might not work for him. It works for me, but it might not work for him even if he did it to the dot, is what I do. That's my biggest pet peeve with this hobby is people think because it worked for them that everyone's going to have the same success, and that's not how this works. Definitely not how it works with Planet Tank.
So watch your organisms pretty much.
Yeah, learning what your plants tell you is the biggest part of the planet, being successful with Planet Tank. I don't know how to explain it in words. I just, over the years, I've learned. I know what my plant needs by looking at how it's reacting to where it was a week ago. You know what I mean? I know something's getting off balance, but that comes with experience. That's not science-based. It's just me knowing from doing
trial and error.
Yes. That's why I tell everybody that wants to know about Planet Tanks, don't listen to what anybody or what article said. Try it, you kill it, that's part of it. If you have great success, then you're successful with it. So, yeah, we're good.
So I have a
I think can we take questions afterward?
starting, like,
that?
let's say you have a tank that has no CO2 and you want to add CO2 to the system. Do you have to is that like a standard, like you only do 1 bubble per second, or like, do you like have to slowly increase it, or do you just kind of set it where you think it's going to
Read your fish. I guess if you have fish and you're concerned about your
Right.
fish,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what you need to be reading as your inhabitants. If your fish are going to have a big shock to it, it's not the same kind of pH drop.
Okay.
It's not the same as far as the way the fish.
Thanks, guys. We got it.